There are only 3 things that matters in territory wars.
To crush your enemies. Hell, see them driven before you. And to collect the banners!
Territory Wars is coming really soon. If you haven't noticed already in your game right now, you can start enrolling for the future upcoming Territory Wars that is coming up next week. I got to play it in the beta, and it is very simple to follow. And in today's video, I'm going to give you an offensive strategy and farming guide for how to conquer territory wars when you're on the offensive. In case you haven't seen it already, my fellow game changers have put out guides as well for territory wars. MobileGamer put out a guide on how to collect banners, and CrazyExcuses put out a guide on how to do well on the defensive end of territory wars. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you how to bring the battle to the enemy guild and crush them with your might. So stay tuned. Let's get into it, and we're first going to talk about the strategy and the overlying concept of the attack phase for territory wars. So just as a quick overview of the offensive phase, after setting up the setup phase, which CrazyExcuses made a video on, whatever units you did not set up for defense are used to attack the opposing guild's territories, which are filled with teams they set up as defense, ranging from meta teams to some B and C level teams. For every defensive squad you manage to beat, you earn banners for your guild. That is the main objective of territory wars. And to prevent one team from simply dominating territory wars, kind of like what we see in Arena, after winning a battle, the units that you just used can no longer be used for the remainder of the territory war session that your guild is in. But once all the teams that were set up in a territory are completely eliminated, you have conquered that territory, gained a large boost of banners for your team, and you get to push farther into the opposing guild's field, and the end goal is to try to take over all the territories on the opposing guild side. So that was just a quick overview of the attack phase for territory wars, but let's get more into the strategy. So we're first going to talk about the quick strategy guide, and following that, I'll give you a brief farming guide on what to look for when farming characters for territory wars. You're going to be fighting a wide variety of teams. They're going to be setting up a lot of defensive teams, and not all the teams are going to be meta. You're going to have teams such as First Order, Jedi, Darth Vader, Sith, some random Empire characters, and some other misfit type of squads. So that means you have a lot of flexibility to create your own B and C level teams, and the goal is to save your best teams, your meta teams, and certain factions for the most difficult defensive teams out there, such as Commander Luke Skywalker and General Kenobi, because you will probably encounter some here and there. But also, you want to have some teams to take on the enemy's B and C level defense teams. And guys, you just got to be strategic with which squad you use to attack the enemy's defenses. You don't want to be using your best team to go up against a very weak defensive team, and vice versa. You want your best teams going up against the best defensive squads, and your B and C level squads going up against the B and C level defenses. So now let's go into the farming guide aspect, and to be honest, this is going to be more of a brief, general, overarching farming guide because there are so many great characters for territory wars that compose a variety of teams, that work in a variety of teams. So I'm going to give you some general ideas on some factions you should be working on, some of the meta teams you should be focusing on, and lastly, I'm just going to give you a little brief overview on some random characters you might want to consider farming individually. There are going to be numerous teams, as you will see, so it's impossible for me to make a simple guide that tells you use this squad, because you're going to be facing so many different players, so many different characters, so many different squads, and you're going to be using a wide variety of compositions to start your offensive. Therefore, the idea behind this farming guide is to recommend characters and factions to gear up that will do well outside of territory wars, because territory wars is not the whole aspect of the game. So if you're farming something, you want to make sure it's great for territory wars, but also for Arena, the AAT raid, the Rancor raid, and various legendary events. So the first obvious choice for going in territory wars and picking your offensive teams is to pick the meta teams as of now. And if you don't know, the meta is essentially the most efficient teams around that can take on some of the best teams ever, and that's what you usually see in the top end of the Arena. And I'm showing a screenshot right now of some example meta teams, and you're probably familiar with these, such as Commander Luke Skywalker, R2-D2, Han Solo, Kenobi, and Thrawn, General Kenobi, Barriss, Nihilus, Thrawn, and R2, even Thrawn Empire teams and Mother Talzin Night Sister teams. These are teams that are known to compete very well in the top end of the game, and these teams are known to beat pretty much any other team out there for the most part, but not everyone can access these meta teams. And as I said earlier, you can't keep using the same meta team over and over again in Territory Wars, so you're going to need a lot of A, B, and C level teams here. So what I'm going to do first is go over Atop factions to farm, because there's a lot of great factions out there to farm, and they're going to give you a lot of oomph when you're taking on the enemy. The number one faction that everyone should farm and have at least one Zeta on is the Resistance Squad. I've made many videos on this. The Resistance is the most effective offensive base squad out there that only requires one Zeta on Finn, and that also requires Poe and Resistance Trooper, and you can add 2 other characters in that mix of your choosing. A lot of flexibility with that team, and it's known to defeat all these top meta teams on offense, and it can take on pretty much any other B and C level team. There's a card up in the top right. If you want to get some more advice on the Resistance Squad, click on that card. I give you the whole rundown on how the Resistance faction works, but my main guide for using the Resistance is save them for the most difficult defensive team you see. If you see that Commander Luke Skywalker team or General Kenobi defensive team, you want to use Resistance because you're pretty much guaranteed to win, assuming you follow the strategy correctly. The next big faction you guys probably should be working on are the Rebels. I used a lot of different Rebel type of lineups for Territory Wars. They are great against B teams, C teams, and obviously the Commander Luke Skywalker is the A-level Rebel team. And Rebels are needed for a variety of legendary events such as Thrawn and Palpatine, but mainly you put a couple Rebels together and you got yourself a very solid B plus type of team, even in the absence of Commander Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. For example, Wedge, Biggs, Lando, Ezra Bridger, and Leia put together in a team already puts out a lot of damage that can destroy many other teams such as Darth Vader teams, or perhaps a Boba Fett team in the other field. You get a lot of usefulness out of the Rebels. So try that out, get a bunch of Rebels, and you're going to do very well in Territory Wars right there. Empire is another great faction to look into. Obviously, Thrawn, Director Krennic, Death Trooper, Stormtrooper, and Shore Trooper are the meta for Empire teams, but most of the teams you're going to be fighting in Territory Wars probably won't have General Kenobi, since a lot of people want to save their Kenobi for the offense, and if there's no Kenobi on the other team, that means General Veers and Snow Trooper can go to town. Imperial Troopers will be great against non-Kenobi teams. Imperial Troopers are also heavily needed for the brand new Dark Side territory battles. They're required for many things, so you're getting your bang for your buck right there. They're also great for the AAT raid, but the ideal Imperial Trooper team, in my opinion, would be Veers Snow Trooper, because his AoE is just insane. Snow Trooper can constantly get his AoE back and forth and do some massive damage. Stormtrooper, Shore Trooper, Death Trooper. You can also put other characters in, such as TIE Fighter, Pilot, or Royal Guard, Magma Trooper. A lot of flexibility. As long as you're not fighting a Kenobi team, Empire squads are very solid B teams, and you can even make a couple good C teams out of an Empire squad. Now, as much as I do not like Ewoks in this game, I have to say they are quite effective in Territory Wars. They get a lot of bonus Terminator, they get a bonus protection, they get a lot of assist. They do a lot of great stuff, and I was able to get a lot of good battles with the Ewok faction. The only problem is Wicket's not the easiest character to farm, but even in the absence of Wicket, the Ewoks are a very solid faction. If you need to farm them, they are great, and they're also needed for a variety of mini events out there, and they also do great in the AAT raid. And guys, there's just so many factions out there that can get the job done. These were just my top level ideas, like the Phoenix. The Phoenix is a great squad. Everyone should have the Phoenix geared up and farmed because of the Thrawn event, the Chimera event, and they're a very solid beginner faction, and they can take on a ton of teams in Territory War. So Phoenix is great. First Order a bit harder to farm and not as useful, but you need the First Order for the BB-8 event. And on Territory Wars, at least in the Jakku map, First Order and Resistance get a bonus, so First Order is also good for the whole Territory Wars aspect of the game. And Sith is another great option out there. Darth Nihilus and Darth Maul, Darth Sidious do some great work out there as well. So those are just some rough ideas on factions to farm, but let's get a little bit more specific and talk about some characters that you probably should look at, especially if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of characters. You got to make sure you got the biggest bang for your buck for some leaders and individual characters out there. One of the most important things about winning battles in Territory Wars or anywhere else is having a suitable leader. If you are someone who can't farm much at once, you need to get a character that at least has a great leader ability that applies to everyone and not just a specific character or a specific faction. And I have three here that I think you guys should look into. Especially if you're a beginner player or an intermediate player, these three leaders will allow you to compose a variety of teams under them since they're a catch-all leader ability. Boba Fett is arguably the best catch-all leader in this game. He grants all allies, not just bounty hunters, all allies plus 50% critical damage and 10% critical chance for all of his allies. So that means just put a bunch of great damage dealers under him, such as veteran Han Solo, veteran Chewbacca, maybe Leia, Wedge, Biggs, Lando, IG-88, so many characters that can work with Boba Fett. So I highly recommend everyone try to have Boba Fett because he is going to make a very solid B team with huge damage dealers behind him. You'll be able to get a lot of the enemy's defensive squads out with that type of lineup. If Boba Fett's not enough for you guys who are trying to compose these random teams, Anakin Skywalker is also a very suitable leader for all allies. He grants a nice, decent offense boost for all of his allies, and in case you fight those Darth Maul teams or Old Ben or Count Dooku teams, he also helps you get extra damage with his advantage up anytime the enemy tries to evade. So again, great catch-all leader, and he also has buff immunity, healing immunity, and all that other stuff. So regardless if you use him as a leader or not, I highly recommend Anakin be in your inventory if you're trying to find a way to make more teams for Territory Wars. And the third, there's a lot of leaders out there, but the third best catch-all leader, in my opinion, is Captain Phasma. Very easily accessible beginner character, and a lot of intermediate players will have her, and she's important for the First Order, for the BB-8 event. But more importantly, her leader ability grants allies a 20% chance to call someone else in to assist during their attack. That's as generic as it comes, as general as it comes, and it works for many types of lineups. So once you're starting to get down to the bottom of your inventory, put Captain Phasma, a couple characters behind her, and you probably got at least a decent C or B- level team right there. So leaders is a very important thing, and obviously if you're going to have a specific faction, you might want to get a character that really amplifies that faction, such as Wedge. Huge damage and health bonuses for Rebels and Empire characters. You can have characters like Palpatine leading, but if you're running towards the bottom of your barrel, you need to make sure you have a couple leaders that work with all types of allies. And lastly, characters. Now, as I said, Territory Wars is a very general event. There are so many characters out there that do well, but you want to make sure you got characters such as Buff Dispellers, need Taunters, people that can cleanse. There are so many things to consider for Territory Wars. So what I'm going to show you guys is my Hall of Fame ranking table. Now, this is one of the things I'm famous for. One of my most popular videos out there talks about how I rank my table, and I always keep this website updated. There's a link down below in the comments if you want to make sure you're always up to date on what characters are ranked where. I always add characters, I always move characters. Click on that link down below. This website has been a huge help for many people in the community, and I'm happy you guys enjoy this resource. So make sure you bookmark it, but essentially the reason why I'm showing you this is because essentially if you kind of farm any of these characters on the list, you want to make sure you know how good they are. So pretty much what I'm going to say is everything from Knight and above, if you farm them, you will get some sort of decent use out of them for Territory Wars and many other aspects of the game. Obviously, Grandmasters are going to be the most popular. They are the strongest characters in the game. They define the pinnacle of power in this game, and there are a lot of good masters in the game that are very easily accessible. So look for those characters. A lot of those master characters will make some very fine squads for you, and Knights, they pair very well with Masters and Grandmasters. So make sure you combine a lot of these characters together, and you're going to find yourself a lot of great teams to form. Again, a lot of flexibility for Territory Wars, and the main reason why I'm showing you this is because there's not one type of team you're going to face in Territory Wars. So when you're farming a character, you got to make sure they're used for a lot of things in the game, and they are very good. And this is exactly what my table is trying to show you guys. So hopefully this table gives you a rough idea on what characters to farm and if the character you are farming is good for the long run. But that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. Again, you're not going to fight one specific team in Territory Wars, so that is why I'm trying to make this guide as general as possible, because you want to make sure you're just farming good characters that have a great general purpose in the game. So down below, let me know what you guys think about this guide. And Territory Wars is not as hard as you guys think. Make good squads, get in there, crush your enemies, and collect the banners. If you guys did enjoy this video, please leave me a like, comment down below, and subscribe so you're not missing a thing, guys. And as always,
crush your enemies, see them driven before you,
and to collect the banners!